a widowed cowboy looked for a nanny. After that night, she became his wife Wild West. The wind carried a faint scent of sagebrush and wildflowers, but no matter how beautiful the day seemed, Jack felt a heaviness in his chest that he could not shake. Ever since his wife, Mary, had passed away, life had felt emptier, harder, lonelier. He had always been a strong man, capable of handling the rough work of the Wild West, but the quiet moments at night, when the ranch fell silent, reminded him of what he had lost. Mary had been the heart of the McAllister home. She had a warmth that could fill any room, a laugh that made even the hardest days brighter, and a gentle way with their daughter Emily that Jack had never been able to match. Emily was barely 6, a bright little girl with her mother's golden hair and curious eyes, but since Mary's death, she had become quieter, more cautious, and sometimes, Jack feared, a little too lonely. He tried to keep her busy with chores and lessons, but the joy that Mary had once brought to their days could not be replaced with work alone. Jack wiped the sweat from his forehead and adjusted the brim of his hat. He had spent the last hour checking the fences along the pasture, making sure the horses were safe and that the cattle were still grazing where they should. It was tiring work, but it kept his mind busy. He had learned early in life that the ranch demanded attention, that the land and the animals never cared about grief or sorrow. If a fence fell, the cows would escape. If a horse was sick, it would suffer. There was no time to grieve when life on the ranch pressed forward. Still, even with the constant labor, Jack felt the empty spaces in his life. Emily had started asking questions he couldn't answer. "When will Mom come back?" she had asked last week, her little hands clutching the edge of the kitchen table. Jack had knelt beside her and tried to explain as gently as he could, "Mommy is in heaven now, sweetheart. She can't come back, but she's always with us in our hearts." Emily had nodded, but her eyes had filled with tears. Jack's own throat had tightened as he held her close. He knew he needed help. It was no longer a question of pride or stubbornness. He couldn't be everything for Emily and the ranch at the same time. The children's literature he found in town had helped a little, but it was clear that Emily needed a woman's touch, someone who could care for her in ways that Jack, for all his love, simply could not. And so, with a mixture of hesitation and resolve, Jack decided he would hire a nanny. The idea of bringing a stranger into his home made Jack uneasy. He was not used to letting anyone inside the walls of his ranch except for trusted neighbors or the occasional traveling merchant. But he knew it was for Emily, and in the end, he would do whatever it took to give her a sense of normalcy and comfort. He had written the advertisement himself and had sent it to the small town nearby, hoping to find someone reliable, trustworthy, and kind-hearted. Days passed slowly, and Jack continued his work, checking the livestock, tending to the fields, and making minor repairs around the ranch. Each evening, he would sit by the fire with Emily reading stories from his mother's old books or telling tales of his own adventures from when he was younger. Emily would snuggle close, her head resting against his shoulder, and for a moment the loneliness would ease. Yet he could see the longing in her eyes for someone who could guide her in ways he could not. One afternoon, as Jack mended a broken fence post, he noticed a figure approaching from the trail. She walked with a confident, steady step, her dress simple but neat, and her hat pulled low to shield her face from the sun. Jack straightened, squinting against the bright light, and wondered if this could be the person he had been waiting for. "Hello," she said, lifting her hat slightly as she came closer. Her voice was calm, warm, and polite. "I'm Clara Bennett. I answered your advertisement for a nanny." Jack nodded, still cautious. "I'm Jack McAllister. Welcome to the ranch. Let's see if we can talk." He motioned for her to follow him toward the house, where Emily was playing quietly on the porch. Clara's eyes softened as she saw Emily, and she knelt down to greet the little girl with a gentle smile. "Hi there, Emily. I'm Clara. I hear you could use a little company." Emily's eyes lit up, and for the first time in weeks she seemed genuinely happy. She rushed forward and hugged Clara tightly. Jack watched from the doorway, a small smile tugging at his lips despite himself. Over the next few days, Clara proved herself capable, patient, and kind. She helped Emily with her lessons, taught her new games, and even managed to coax a few laughs from the little girl, something Jack hadn't heard in far too long. Jack began to see her not only as a caretaker, but as a person with strength and warmth he respected. She was quiet in her manner but firm when needed, and she handled the challenges of ranch life with grace. Jack found himself observing Clara more often than he realized. He noticed the way she tended to the garden, the careful way she prepared meals, and the gentle way she spoke to Emily. He had spent so long alone that he forgot what it was like to have another adult around, someone to share the burdens and small joys of everyday life. Slowly, Jack began to feel a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Despite his growing admiration, Jack remained cautious. He was a widower, and he knew that his heart was still healing from the loss of Mary. He did not want to rush into anything or let his emotions cloud his judgment. Still, he couldn't deny the sense of relief and comfort that Clara brought to the ranch, a presence that made both Emily and himself feel safer and more at home. Evenings became easier. Emily would talk animatedly about her day with Clara, describing the games they played and the lessons she learned. Jack would listen, sometimes laughing quietly at the stories, sometimes feeling a lump in his throat as he realized how much Emily had needed this companionship. And at night, when the house grew quiet and the stars filled the sky, Jack would find himself thinking about Clara, wondering about the life she had lived before arriving at his ranch, and hoping that maybe, just maybe, she could become a part of theirs. The ranch, once silent and heavy with grief, began to feel alive again. The sound of laughter, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the sight of Emily running freely across the fields brought a sense of normalcy that Jack hadn't thought possible since Mary's passing. And as he watched Clara and Emily together, he realized that the hardest days of his life were not behind him. They were still here. But maybe, with help, they could be brighter, lighter, and filled with hope once more. Jack knew the road ahead would not be easy. Life on the ranch was always demanding, and love, even in its simplest forms, required patience, trust, and courage. But for the first time in a long while, Jack felt that he was not alone. He had Emily, he had Clara, and slowly, the walls around his heart were beginning to crack, letting in a light he thought he would never see again. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Jack sat on the porch, Emily asleep inside, and Clara tending to the evening chores. He tipped his hat back, took a deep breath of the cool evening air, and felt a sense of quiet determination. He would do whatever it took to protect his daughter, to honor his late wife's memory, and perhaps to give his heart a second chance at love. The Wild West was a place of challenges, hardships, and unexpected turns, but Jack McAllister knew one thing for certain: life, even after loss, could still bring new beginnings. And with Clara now part of their lives, the hope of brighter days ahead felt real, tangible, and within reach. Clara Bennett had arrived at the McAllister Ranch with little more than a suitcase and a quiet determination in her heart. She had traveled from a town far away, drawn by the promise of work and the hope of a fresh start. Clara was no stranger to hard work. She had grown up in a small, hard-working family, learning to care for children and manage a household from a young age. But this was different. This was not just about work. It was about stepping into someone else's life, a life shadowed by grief, responsibility, and the daily demands of the Wild West. The first morning at the ranch, Clara awoke before dawn. The chill of the early morning air seeped through the cracks in the wooden walls, but she welcomed it. She dressed quickly in practical clothing, a simple dress, sturdy boots, and a hat to shield her from the sun, and made her way to the kitchen. Jack McAllister was already there, tending to a pot of coffee over the small stove, his movements careful and precise. "Morning," Jack said without looking up, his voice steady but tired. Clara nodded in greeting, keeping her voice soft. "Good morning, Mr. McAllister," she said. "I can make breakfast if you like." Jack glanced at her and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "That'd be fine. Emily should be up soon." Clara moved quietly, unpacking the few items she had brought and setting to work. She chopped vegetables, mixed batter for pancakes, and prepared eggs and bacon with practiced efficiency. It was not just the act of cooking, it was the care she put into it, the way she moved around the small kitchen as though she belonged there, yet remained respectful of the space and the people who already lived in it. Soon, the sound of little footsteps echoed from the staircase. Emily appeared, rubbing her eyes, her hair tousled from sleep. When she saw Clara, her face lit up with a bright, genuine smile that warmed Clara's heart instantly. "Good morning, Emily," Clara said, kneeling down to meet her at eye level. "Did you sleep well?" Emily nodded eagerly. "Yes, and I'm hungry. Is that breakfast I smell?" Clara laughed softly. "Yes, it's almost ready. You'll have pancakes and eggs." Emily clapped her hands in excitement, then turned to glance at her father. Jack watched the interaction quietly, a small smile on his face. He felt a sense of relief seeing Emily so happy, and he was beginning to realize just how much this young woman could bring to their lives. As the days passed, Clara settled into her role with remarkable ease. She helped Emily with her lessons, guiding her through reading, writing, and arithmetic. She encouraged Emily to explore the ranch safely, teaching her about the plants, the animals, and the importance of responsibility. Emily responded eagerly, soaking up Clara's attention and affection. Her laughter, once rare, began to echo through the rooms and across the fields, bringing a lightness to the ranch that Jack had not felt in years. Clara also worked alongside Jack, though she made sure never to overstep. She repaired fences, fed the animals, and helped with household chores. Jack noticed her competence and admired her ability to handle the roughness of ranch life without complaint. She had a quiet strength that matched his own, but where he was rugged and sometimes harsh, she was gentle and patient. Together, they managed the daily routines, forming a rhythm that balanced work with care. Jack found himself observing Clara more often than he realized. He noticed the way she treated Emily with kindness and firmness, guiding her gently, but allowing her independence. He noticed the careful way she handled the animals, speaking softly yet with authority when needed. And he noticed the moments when she allowed herself a smile or a laugh, small glimpses of a woman who had endured much but remained unbroken. Despite Jack's growing respect for Clara, he remained cautious. He had loved deeply once, and the memory of Mary was always with him. Opening his heart again felt both tempting and frightening. He found himself thinking about Clara at odd moments, when he was repairing a fence, riding the fields, or sitting by the fire at night. There was a pull he could not deny, yet he told himself to wait, to be patient, and to ensure that any feelings he had were rooted in reality and not in fleeting loneliness. Emily, however, had no such reservations. She adored Clara and sought her out at every opportunity. She shared secrets, dreams, and little worries with Clara, trusting her in a way that Jack found both comforting and enlightening. Jack realized that Emily had instinctively recognized something in Clara, someone who could fill the gap left by Mary, at least in part, and who could help guide her through childhood with care and love. One afternoon, Jack returned from the fields to find Clara and Emily in the garden, planting flowers and vegetables. Emily was laughing as she dug into the soil, dirt smudging her hands and face, while Clara guided her gently, showing her the proper way to plant seeds and water the young shoots. Jack paused at the edge of the garden, watching them. The sight of Clara bending down to help Emily, her hair catching the sunlight, filled him with a warmth he had not felt in years. "Dinner will be ready soon," he called, trying to sound casual, though his voice betrayed a hint of emotion. Emily ran over to him, still laughing, and tugged at his hand. "Daddy, come see what we planted." Jack knelt beside her, examining the small rows of vegetables and flowers. "Looks good, Em. You've got a green thumb like your mother." Clara smiled softly at the comment, but her eyes held a deeper understanding. She had seen the love Jack had for his daughter, the pride he felt even in small achievements. And she had also seen the grief he carried, the quiet moments when he seemed almost lost in thought. It was this combination of strength and vulnerability that drew her to him, though she kept her feelings carefully guarded. As the weeks turned into months, life at the McAllister Ranch began to settle into a comfortable routine. Clara's presence brought a sense of stability and warmth that had been missing since Mary's passing. Emily thrived under her care, becoming more confident, joyful, and curious about the world around her. And Jack, while still cautious, found himself opening up more, sharing stories of Mary, of his own childhood, and of the dreams he held for Emily's future. Clara and Jack began to develop a quiet understanding, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared responsibility. They did not rush or force their emotions, but their interactions were filled with subtle moments of connection. A shared glance across the kitchen, a hand briefly touching while carrying water, a quiet conversation by the fire at night. Each moment built trust and familiarity, laying the groundwork for something deeper. Jack began to realize that Clara was not just helping with Emily or the ranch, she was helping him as well. She brought light into the shadows of his life, laughter into the quiet moments, and a sense of hope he had not felt in years. He found himself thinking about her when she was not around, wondering about her past, her dreams, and her thoughts. He noticed how his chest lifted slightly at the sound of her laugh, how his shoulders relaxed when she was near, and how he longed to see her smile each day. Clara, too, found herself growing attached. She had come to the ranch seeking work and a fresh start, but she discovered something unexpected, a sense of belonging. Emily's warmth and affection had softened her heart, and Jack's quiet strength and integrity had earned her respect and admiration. She saw in him a man shaped by love and loss, a man who had given his all to his daughter and his land. And slowly, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future where she could be part of that life, though she remained cautious, understanding the complexities of grief and trust. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon, the ranch quiet and peaceful, Jack and Clara found themselves alone on the porch. Emily had gone to bed, and the only sound was the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. They sat together side by side, each lost in their thoughts. "You've done a lot for us," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of emotion. Clara glanced at him, a small smile on her lips. "I wanted to help. Emily's a wonderful little girl, and this ranch, it feels like a place worth caring for." Jack nodded slowly. "It's more than that. You've made things easier for both of us. I didn't realize how much we needed someone like you." Clara looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her dress. "I didn't know what to expect when I came here. I just knew I wanted to do my best." Jack's gaze softened. "You've done more than that. You've brought life back into this place. I don't know how to thank you." They sat in silence for a few more moments, listening to the gentle night sounds, the distant calls of animals, the whisper of the wind. There was no rush, no pressure, just a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had begun to grow between them. Jack knew that life on the ranch was still full of challenges, and that grief and hardship would never completely disappear. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace, of hope, and of possibility. With Clara by their side, perhaps the days ahead would be brighter, lighter, and filled with more joy than he had dared to imagine. And Clara, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly, realized that she had found not only work but a place where she could belong, a family she could care for, and perhaps, in time, a man she could trust and love. The storm came without warning, as storms often did in the wide-open plains of the West. One moment the sky was clear, a pale blue stretching endlessly above the McAllister Ranch, and the next, dark clouds rolled across the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields. Jack McAllister, who had been mending a fence near the pasture, squinted up at the sky. The wind had picked up, rustling the tall grass, and he felt the first sharp drops of rain splatter against his weathered face. "This doesn't look good," Jack muttered under his breath. He could sense the tension in the air, the sudden change in wind direction, and the heavy smell of rain mixing with the earth. He knew that storms in this part of the country could be fierce and fast, sometimes bringing danger with them. The cattle and horses would be spooked, the fences could be damaged, and Emily, his precious little girl, would be vulnerable if the storm worsened. He turned toward the house, noticing Clara's figure through the window, calmly preparing for the coming storm. She was moving with a quiet efficiency, gathering supplies, checking on Emily, and securing the small porch where the girl often played. There was something about the way she worked, methodical, confident, and calm, that made Jack's chest tighten. He realized again just how much he relied on her, not only for the practical work around the ranch, but for the peace of mind that came with knowing she was there. "Emily," Jack called, hurrying toward the house. The little girl's small frame appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with both curiosity and fear. "We're going to stay inside for a bit. A storm's coming." Emily clutched at Jack's hand. "Is it going to be scary, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small. Jack knelt to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "It might be a little noisy, but we'll be fine. Clara and I will make sure you're safe, okay?" Emily nodded, trusting her father completely. She ran to Clara, who scooped her up in her arms, holding her close and whispering gentle reassurances. Jack watched them, feeling a mixture of relief and admiration. Clara's presence was steadying, grounding both him and Emily in a way he hadn't experienced before. As the storm approached, the wind howled through the open fields, whipping the tall grasses and bending the trees. Rain pelted the roof, and the first flashes of lightning illuminated the darkened sky. Thunder rolled across the hills, shaking the ground beneath them. Emily clung to Clara, shivering slightly, while Jack moved quickly to secure the barn and the animals. The horses were nervous, stamping their hooves and tossing their heads, while the cows crowded together, unsettled by the sudden chaos. Jack worked tirelessly, shouting commands over the roar of the storm, while Clara followed his instructions with precision. She moved with strength and determination, helping to corral the animals, reinforcing loose fences, and ensuring that Emily remained safe inside the house. Jack glanced at her occasionally, and each time he did, he was reminded of her courage. She was not just a caretaker. She was a force of calm in the storm, someone who could think clearly and act decisively under pressure. At one point, a large branch broke from a tree near the pasture and threatened to fall on the barn. Jack sprinted toward it, narrowly dodging the heavy wood, and worked to secure the structure before it was damaged. Clara was right behind him, holding Emily close in the barn doorway, shielding her from the rain and shouting words of encouragement. The teamwork between them was instinctive, built on days of observing and understanding each other. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only a shared determination to protect Emily and their home. The storm raged on through the night. Lightning flashed across the sky in bright, jagged streaks, illuminating the fields and casting eerie shadows across the ranch. Thunder shook the ground, rattling windows and doors, but inside the house, Clara kept Emily calm, reading her stories in a soft voice and singing quiet songs to distract her from the noise. Jack moved between the barn and the house, ensuring the animals were safe and repairing minor damages as they arose. Hours passed, and exhaustion began to take its toll. Jack was soaked to the bone, his muscles aching from the continuous labor. Clara, too, showed signs of fatigue, her hair damp and her face streaked with rain and dirt. Yet neither of them allowed the weariness to slow them. They had a responsibility to the animals, to the ranch, and most importantly, to Emily. The little girl was their constant motivation, a reminder of why they could not afford to falter. During a brief lull in the storm, Jack returned to the house, dripping water onto the floor. He found Clara sitting on the porch steps, holding Emily, both of them wrapped in a thick blanket. Emily's eyes were heavy with sleep, but she smiled at him, reassured by the presence of both adults. Jack knelt beside them, brushing Clara's damp hair from her face and feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. "You've done more than I could have asked for," Jack said quietly, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of thunder. Clara looked at him, a faint smile on her lips, her eyes meeting his. There was an unspoken understanding in that moment, a connection forged through shared effort and mutual care. Clara shook her head slightly. "We did this together. Emily needed both of us. That's all that matters." Jack's hand brushed against hers, an accidental touch that lingered longer than it should have. He felt a strange, comforting surge of emotion, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something deeper that he couldn't yet name. Clara's gaze softened, and for a moment they allowed themselves to acknowledge the bond forming between them, even amid the chaos of the storm. As the night wore on, the storm began to lose some of its fury. The rain slowed to a steady drizzle, and the wind's howl softened to a whisper. Jack made a final check of the barn and fences, ensuring that everything was secure before returning to the house. By the time he stepped inside, Emily had finally drifted into a peaceful sleep, Clara still holding her close. Jack sat beside them on the porch, letting the quiet settle over him. The storm had tested them, challenged them, and revealed strengths they had not fully recognized in each other. He realized that Clara was not just a nanny or a helper, she was a partner in every sense of the word. Her courage, patience, and determination had seen them through the night, and her compassion had provided comfort and safety for Emily. The storm had also shown Jack something about himself. He saw the protective instinct that had always driven him as a father, the resilience that had kept him going after Mary's death, and the capacity for trust and connection that he had feared he had lost. He understood that allowing Clara into their lives did not diminish his love for Mary or his memory of her. Instead, it allowed room for new beginnings, for healing, and for growth. Clara, sitting beside Jack, felt a similar realization. She had come to the ranch seeking work and a fresh start, but the storm had shown her the depth of the McAllisters' lives, the love, the responsibility, and the courage required to face each day. She had also seen Jack's unwavering commitment to his daughter, his willingness to protect and provide, and the quiet tenderness beneath his rugged exterior. She knew that her place at the ranch was more than a job. It was a connection to a family, a home, and perhaps a future that she had not dared to imagine. By morning, the storm had passed entirely, leaving the ranch glistening with wet grass and puddles reflecting the rising sun. Birds began to chirp, and the animals emerged cautiously from their shelters, shaking off the remnants of the rain. Jack stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. He looked around the ranch, at the fences, the barns, the fields, and felt a renewed sense of pride and determination. They had survived the night together, and in doing so, they had strengthened the bonds that tied them to each other. Emily awoke shortly after sunrise, her little face bright with excitement as she ran to the porch. "Daddy, look at the puddles. Can I jump in them?" she asked, her voice full of energy and joy. Clara laughed softly, lifting Emily into her arms. "Of course, sweetheart. But let's make sure your boots are tied tight first." Jack watched them play, the sun casting a warm glow over the ranch, and felt a sense of peace he had not experienced in years. The storm had been frightening and exhausting, but it had also revealed something beautiful: the power of courage, teamwork, and love. He realized that the challenges they faced together were not obstacles to fear, but opportunities to grow closer, to understand each other, and to build a life that could withstand whatever storms the future might bring. That night, as they sat by the fire, Jack reflected on the events of the stormy evening. He knew that life on the ranch would continue to be demanding and unpredictable, but he also knew that with Clara and Emily by his side, he was not facing it alone. They had faced a trial together and had emerged stronger, united by the experience, and by the unspoken understanding that they were more than just two people brought together by circumstance. They were a family in the making. Jack's eyes met Clara's across the fire, and he saw in her gaze a reflection of his own feelings, respect, gratitude, and a quiet affection that had grown steadily over the past weeks. He understood that the events of the storm had changed everything. It had shown him Clara's courage, revealed her true character, and allowed him to see the possibility of a future filled with hope and love. Clara, feeling the warmth of the fire and the presence of both Jack and Emily, allowed herself a small smile. The storm had tested them all, but it had also forged a connection that would shape the days to come. She realized that she had found more than work at the McAllister Ranch. She had found a place where she belonged, a family to care for, and perhaps a man whose heart was open enough to receive hers in time. After the storm had passed, life at the McAllister Ranch slowly returned to its steady rhythm, but something had shifted between Jack and Clara. The experience of that night, the danger, the exhaustion, and the shared responsibility, had created a bond that neither of them could ignore. It was subtle at first, a glance that lingered a moment longer than necessary, a gentle touch that held meaning, a quiet smile exchanged across the kitchen while Emily played nearby. Jack had always been a man of few words, but now he found himself observing Clara in ways he hadn't expected. He noticed the strength in her movements, the careful attention she gave to Emily, and the quiet confidence that made her seem capable of handling anything the West could throw at them. Clara, for her part, was aware of the change in Jack. She had always respected him for his work ethic, his love for Emily, and the rugged determination that had carried him through hardship. But now she noticed the moments when his eyes softened as he watched her, the way he seemed to hesitate before speaking, as though measuring his words against the growing feelings he was beginning to recognize. Clara knew that he was still healing from Mary's death, that his heart had been shaped by loss and love alike, and she understood that patience would be required if she hoped to truly become part of their lives. Days passed in a comfortable routine, punctuated by small moments of connection. Clara would help Emily with her lessons in the morning while Jack tended the horses, returning occasionally to glance at them with a quiet pride. At mealtimes, the three of them would sit together, sharing stories, laughter, and the simple satisfaction of being a family, even if not yet fully recognized as one. The farm chores were plentiful, and the work kept both Jack and Clara busy, yet it also allowed them to learn about each other in subtle ways, the little habits, the shared humor, the unspoken understanding that grew stronger with every passing day. One afternoon, Jack was repairing a section of fence along the pasture when Clara appeared at his side, holding a bucket of water and a small bag of supplies. "Thought you might need a drink," she said, her voice calm but warm. Jack took the bucket and nodded, offering a small smile. "Thanks, I didn't realize how thirsty I was until now." Clara smiled back, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "You work hard, you deserve it." They stood there for a moment in silence, the wind rustling the grass and the distant sound of horses in the field. Jack felt a strange sense of peace in her presence, a comfort that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He wanted to say more, to reach out and express the thoughts that had been building in his chest, but the words would not come. Instead, he simply nodded, returning to his work, while Clara quietly moved to help him, adjusting a post and offering a steady hand where needed. Evenings became a time for shared moments that went beyond chores and responsibilities. After Emily was tucked into bed, Jack and Clara would sit on the porch or by the fire, talking quietly about the day, the ranch, and the little things that made life meaningful. Sometimes they would speak of the past, Clara's own experiences, Jack's memories of Mary, and the lessons life had taught them both. Other times they would simply sit in silence, letting the comfort of each other's presence speak volumes. Jack began to recognize the growing importance of Clara in his life. He found himself anticipating her advice, valuing her judgment, and seeking her opinion on decisions regarding the ranch. Her perspective was different from his, grounded yet flexible, and he realized that he had come to trust her in ways he hadn't trusted anyone since Mary's passing. This trust, combined with the quiet admiration he felt for her courage and compassion, planted seeds of something more profound, an emotional closeness that hinted at love, though he did not yet dare to name it. Clara also noticed the subtle changes in Jack. She saw the moments when he paused, as though reconsidering a word or gesture, and the brief, tender glances he cast in her direction. She sensed the vulnerability beneath his rugged exterior, the tenderness that only emerged when he was with Emily or in quiet moments alone. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet thrill at the realization that she was no longer just a caretaker or a helper. She was becoming an integral part of their lives, someone who mattered deeply to both father and daughter. Their growing closeness was not without its challenges. Jack occasionally struggled with the lingering memory of Mary, moments when grief would cloud his heart, and he would withdraw into himself. Clara, sensitive to his moods, would give him space while remaining quietly supportive, knowing that patience and understanding were necessary. Similarly, Clara had her own reservations. She had been cautious with her emotions, aware of the risks of becoming too attached too soon, but she could not deny the bond that had developed. She recognized that the future might hold difficulties, but the connection they shared was undeniable, grounding her even as it stirred her heart. One particular afternoon, an incident on the ranch tested their partnership further. A loose fence had allowed some of the younger cattle to wander into a neighbor's field, threatening both the safety of the animals and the relationship with their neighbors. Jack and Clara worked together to round up the cattle, carefully guiding them back through muddy ground while coordinating their efforts with precision. Emily watched from a safe distance, cheering them on, her small voice calling words of encouragement. The teamwork required in that moment revealed more than just their competence. It revealed their ability to rely on each other completely. Jack saw Clara's quick thinking and her ability to remain calm under pressure, and he realized how fortunate he was to have her by his side. Clara, in turn, observed Jack's steady leadership, his protective nature, and the deep love he had for his daughter. By the time the cattle were safely returned, the bond between them had deepened, strengthened by shared effort, trust, and the simple realization that together they were stronger than apart. Even in quiet, everyday moments, their closeness became more apparent. Clara would bring fresh-baked bread to Jack in the mornings as he prepared for the day's work, and he would offer her a smile of thanks, noticing the warmth in her eyes. In the evenings, they would sometimes share small gestures of connection, a hand brushing against another while passing a tool, a glance that lingered just a moment too long, a soft laugh at a shared joke. These moments, though seemingly insignificant, carried meaning and emotion that neither could ignore. Jack began to recognize the changes within himself. He felt a renewed sense of hope, a softening of the walls he had built around his heart after Mary's death. He found himself looking forward to Clara's presence, valuing her opinions, and caring deeply about her well-being. The realization that he had feelings for her, feelings that went beyond admiration and respect, filled him with both excitement and trepidation. He knew he had to tread carefully, honoring the past while allowing for the possibility of new love. Clara, too, felt the stirrings of deeper emotion. She had come to the ranch seeking work and stability, but she had discovered something far more profound, a sense of belonging, a family to care for, and a man whose heart was open to her in ways she had not anticipated. She understood the delicacy of the situation, aware of Jack's grief and the importance of moving slowly, yet she could not ignore the warmth and affection that had grown between them. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Jack and Clara found themselves working together to repair a section of fence near the pasture. Emily had gone inside to rest, leaving the two adults alone in the quiet, open space. The air was filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the lingering warmth of the day, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. "You've done so much for us," Jack said quietly, glancing at Clara as she hammered a post into place. "I don't know how I would have managed without you." Clara paused, wiping her brow and smiling softly. "You would have managed. You're strong, Jack. But it's nice to have a little help now and then." Jack looked at her, his gaze steady and thoughtful. "It's more than help. You've changed things here, made it feel like a home again." Clara felt her chest tighten slightly at his words, recognizing the depth of his sincerity. She nodded, not knowing what else to say, but feeling the truth of his statement resonate within her. They worked together in comfortable silence for the next hour, sharing the simple satisfaction of completing a task side by side. There was a rhythm to their movements, an unspoken understanding that had developed over weeks of shared experiences, challenges, and quiet moments of connection. In that silence, the bond between them deepened, grounded in trust, respect, and the beginnings of love. As night fell and they finally stepped back to admire their work, Jack and Clara shared a look that spoke volumes. There was no rush, no pressure, only the quiet acknowledgement that their lives had intertwined in ways that neither could have anticipated. They returned to the house together, hearts quietly full, knowing that the path ahead would continue to be challenging, but also filled with the promise of growth, understanding, and, perhaps, love. Jack and Clara's relationship was no longer just about duty or responsibility. It had become a partnership built on shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect. They were learning to navigate the complexities of grief, love, and hope together, discovering that even in the rugged, unpredictable life of the Wild West, hearts could find connection, healing, and joy. The days at the McAllister Ranch had grown warmer, calmer, and filled with a gentle rhythm that only life after hardship could bring. Spring had begun to settle over the rolling hills, and the fields were dotted with the first green shoots of the season. Jack McAllister worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk, but these days there was a sense of peace in his labor. The storm of the past months had left its mark, but it had also revealed something important: the value of trust, companionship, and love. Clara Bennett had become more than a nanny. She had become part of their lives in ways Jack had never imagined possible. Emily, now thriving in both spirit and health, was the constant reminder of how much had changed. She ran through the fields with laughter that seemed to echo across the hills, her small hands clutching freshly picked flowers or her favorite book. Clara and Jack often watched her together, sharing quiet smiles that spoke of understanding and a shared purpose. Emily had flourished under Clara's care, and Jack saw clearly how her presence had brought life and warmth back into their home. Jack, though still cautious with his emotions, had begun to recognize the depth of his feelings for Clara. It had started with admiration, grown into respect, and now, he understood, had quietly settled into love. Yet he hesitated, aware of the past and of the care needed when approaching the matters of the heart. Clara was patient, understanding, and careful with him, but Jack wanted to ensure that his next step was meaningful, honest, and unhurried. He knew that Clara was no ordinary woman. She was strong, capable and wise in ways that demanded his attention and his respect. Clara, for her part, felt the stirrings of affection that matched Jack's own, though she remained cautious. She had learned to protect her heart in a world that could be harsh and unpredictable. But she also recognized that life with Jack and Emily was something precious, something worth risking for. She saw in Jack a man who was honorable, tender, and deeply committed to his daughter, and she knew that his heart, once broken, had room again for love. One evening, as the sun began to sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, Jack found himself standing on the porch, watching Clara and Emily gather wildflowers in the fields. He noticed the way Clara moved, gentle yet purposeful, guiding Emily's tiny hands and encouraging her to appreciate the beauty around them. His chest tightened with emotion, and he felt a certainty he had not felt in years. He knew, without question, that he wanted Clara by his side, not just as a helper, but as a partner, as a wife, as someone who could share both the burdens and joys of life with him. He waited for a quiet moment, letting Emily wander off to chase a butterfly, and then he called Clara to him. She approached, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and met his gaze with calm curiosity. "Clara," Jack began, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable weight, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." Clara tilted her head slightly, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "Yes, Jack." He took a deep breath, drawing strength from the warmth of the evening and the gentle sway of the fields around them. "These past months, you've brought life back to this ranch, to Emily and to me. I can't imagine my life without you. I know the past hasn't been easy for either of us, but I want to face the future together. I want you to be my wife." Clara's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and deep emotion crossing her face. She took a step closer, her hand brushing against his. "Jack, I don't know what to say." Jack smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "You don't have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know how I feel. I want us to be a family, officially and fully. Emily already loves you like you're part of her world, and so do I. We can face whatever comes next together." Clara's eyes shimmered with tears, and she placed her hand over his. "I've felt the same way for a while, Jack. I was just afraid of saying it, afraid of moving too fast." Jack nodded, understanding completely. "There's no rush. We have all the time we need, but I wanted you to know my heart." And in that quiet moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of purple and pink, a new chapter began for the McAllister family. The years of hardship, grief, and uncertainty had led them to this moment of hope, trust, and love. The following weeks were filled with preparations for their new life together. Jack and Clara discussed the wedding quietly, choosing a small ceremony that would honor the intimacy and warmth of their family. Emily was overjoyed, helping pick flowers, folding napkins, and planning little details that made her feel included. The ranch itself became a place of celebration, with neighbors quietly offering congratulations, their smiles and support a reflection of the love that had grown so naturally between Jack and Clara. During this time, Jack and Clara continued their daily routines, but now with a renewed sense of joy and purpose. They worked together in the fields, mended fences side by side, and tended to the animals with care and laughter. Every small moment carried a sense of meaning, a reminder of the bond they shared and the family they had created together. Nights were spent by the fire, sharing stories, planning for the future, and simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. Emily flourished, her laughter echoing through the house and across the fields. She delighted in the knowledge that her father and Clara were committed to one another, and she reveled in the sense of stability and love that surrounded her. She had witnessed the storms, both literal and emotional, and now she was seeing the beauty of life when hearts are open and trust is present. The day of the wedding arrived, quiet and sunny, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers across the ranch. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, held on the small hill overlooking the fields, with Emily by their side as the flower girl. Jack wore his best suit, a rare sight on the ranch, while Clara wore a modest, elegant dress, her eyes sparkling with happiness and love. Neighbors and close friends gathered, their smiles warm, their presence a reflection of the support and admiration they held for Jack, Clara, and Emily. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with heartfelt vows exchanged and promises made not only to each other, but to the life they would build together. Jack's voice was steady, filled with emotion as he spoke. "Clara, you've brought light into our lives, and I promise to honor and love you, to stand by you, and to share all the days to come as a family." Clara's voice was soft but certain. "Jack, I promise to love and support you, to care for Emily as my own, and to share in every joy and challenge that life brings. Together, we are stronger, and together, we are home." Emily clapped her hands and cheered as her parents shared their first kiss as husband and wife. Jack lifted her into his arms, spinning her around with laughter, while Clara joined them, the three of them forming a circle of love, warmth, and unity. The reception was modest but full of joy. There was food, laughter, and dancing under the open sky, with the stars beginning to twinkle as night fell. Jack and Clara shared quiet moments together, holding hands and stealing smiles, knowing that their journey had only just begun, but that they were prepared to face it together. As the weeks turned into months, life at the ranch continued with its usual demands, but now with a sense of harmony and fulfillment. Jack, Clara, and Emily worked together, laughed together, and faced challenges as a family. The past was remembered with respect, the hardships acknowledged, but the present and future were filled with hope, love, and resilience. Jack often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, from grief and loneliness to partnership and love. He realized that life had a way of testing the heart, of showing both the depth of loss and the possibility of new beginnings. Clara had been the answer to a need he hadn't fully understood, and in her he had found a partner, a friend, and the love he had thought he might never experience again. Clara, too, reflected on the journey. She had arrived at the McAllister Ranch seeking work and stability, and she had found so much more. She had discovered a place where she belonged, a family she could care for, and a man whose heart was strong, tender, and open to love. She understood that life would continue to have challenges, but she also knew that together they could face anything. Emily, the joyful center of their lives, thrived in the love surrounding her. She saw firsthand the strength of family, the importance of trust and patience, and the beauty of a heart open to love. She laughed freely, learned from her parents, and became a living reminder of the bond that had formed through hardship, patience, and devotion. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, Jack, Clara, and Emily sat on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and full of life. Jack took Clara's hand, holding it gently, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Emily leaned against them, her small arms wrapped around both of their waists. Jack spoke softly, his voice filled with quiet happiness. "I never thought life could feel this full again. I'm grateful for every day, every moment, and every challenge that brought us here." Clara smiled, feeling the truth of his words. "Me too, Jack. We've faced so much, but we've found our way to each other. That's what matters." And as the stars appeared above the McAllister Ranch, the family sat together, their hearts full, their lives intertwined, and their future bright. The story of grief, hope, and love had found its resolution, not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments, in shared labor, in laughter, and in the steadfast presence of those who care deeply for one another. In the rugged, unpredictable landscape of the Wild West, Jack, Clara, and Emily had created something enduring, beautiful, and true. A family bound by love, trust, and hope. And as they watched the sky, the wind carrying the scent of the earth and the promise of new beginnings, they knew that together, they could face whatever the future held.